Hello friend, welcome back. If you're new, my name is Becky, and today what we're going to be doing is starting meal prep for a dinner party we're having in a week from today. It is St. Patrick's Day, and I want to attempt to make my own corned beef. I wanted to do this last year, but I did not do it in time because it takes at least a week to brine your corned beef before it's ready. Now, I am going to be doing this in a brine that doesn't have any pink salt. Basically, we're going to just be using a heavily salted brine in order to make our corned beef. I have about 5 other recipes we're gonna be making, but I haven't completely nailed down the menu yet because it's not for another week, but I know I want corned beef, so we have to start that today. So in this pot with water, I just added 1 cup of salt. This is a bunch of peeled garlic and a couple nubs of ginger. We need to make the brine first and let this simmer for a minute on the stove. I'm gonna add a cinnamon stick to this. I bought myself some new bay leaves because I hadn't bought bay leaves in, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years. And let me show you the difference in color. This is the new bay that I just bought. Look how green that is. Versus, and I can actually smell it, these bay leaves that have been in my pantry for a very long time. I wasn't actually planning to buy bay when I went to the store, but I was getting some other spices and I saw how green these were, and I knew these were not very green, so I went ahead and I replaced my bay. So we're gonna get those in there. Next, we need to add brown sugar, but I don't have any brown sugar right now, but I have molasses, so I'm gonna add about a tablespoon of that and 3/4 cup of sugar. Basically what we want is for this to come up to a boil, and we want our sugar and our salt to dissolve. We wanna start infusing our water with all these flavors. And then I bought pickling spice. This has whole cardamom and coriander and allspice and a bunch of things, and crushed up bay and cinnamon. We're gonna get about 1/4 cup of that in there. I can link the recipe that I'm following to make this down below for you. I looked at a bunch of them and I settled on this one. It smells good already. I'm gonna let this come up to a boil. So I'm gonna put the lid on so that happens faster. And then we'll move on to the next step. So I'm gonna turn this down and let this cool. This brine smells incredible, but we need to drop its temperature before we add our brisket to it. So I just added some ice cubes, and I think I'm gonna get a few more ice cubes to add to this. I want this brine to cool down completely before we add our brisket. This is just under a 4-pound brisket that I got at Costco that was trimmed up pretty well. We don't want to put our beef into a warm brine. That's why we need to let it cool. We're gonna get this in there along with making a mess. I'll get that cleaned up. And then we're gonna put some weights on it to keep the meat in the brine. Corned beef is basically brined or pickled meat. Back in the day, it was a way to preserve meat, and today we're doing it just for flavor. So I put a plate on it to weigh it down so it stays submerged. Put a lid on this, pop this in the fridge, and I will see you back in a week so we can cook this up. I have not done anything with this since I put it in here a week ago. It smells good. It smells just like it did when it went in there. I went back and forth how I was gonna cook this corned beef, and I decided I'm just gonna go with the traditional way in a pot, submerged in a flavorful broth on the stove for many hours. It is 1:37 right now. I have decided on a final menu. We've got quite a bit of cooking we have to do before my mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, and their families come over at 6 o'clock tonight. Hoping to serve dinner 6:15, 6:30-ish. This is gonna take quite a few hours to get tender. And what we need to do first is pull this out of this brine, and we need to rinse this off really well. You wanna get any excess salt off of it. I'm gonna get the ginger, the garlic, the cinnamon sticks off, and we're gonna rinse off the excess salt. And then I'll sanitize my sink when we're done rinsing this off. actually think I want to cut some of that excess fat off, not all of it. I probably should have done this before I brined it, but we're getting to it now. I have this back in my pot, and what we're going to do now is fill this with water. Now, my corned beef is not going to be hot pink like if I bought it at the store, and that's because I did not use curing salt. I just used salt to cure this. Curing salt or pink salt, not pink Himalayan salt, but curing salt that's neon pink, would keep that bright pink, but I don't have that in my house. I didn't want to special order it, so I thought I would just try to find a recipe that doesn't call for that. So that's what I'm doing. I just know that it's not going to be as pink as if I had put the pink salt in there. So now what we need to do is prep the broth to have a little bit more flavor. So I've got some aromatics here that we're going to prep and chop. Actually, I'm not going to chop these. I'm just going to peel them, and we're going to add this to our broth to add some flavor to the liquid as the corned beef cooks. And then I found a random garlic clove that I want to go ahead and peel and put in there as well. Add 2 bay leaves and 2 spoonfuls of our pickling spice, and no salt, because there was a lot of salt added when we cured this corned beef. Lid on. I'm going to have this come up to a simmer, and that's going to cook away for many hours until it is tender. The next thing we need to get going on is the second longest thing that's going to take to cook. It's not actually going to take a ton of time to cook, but it's going to take time to cool before we can decorate it, and that is going to be our pistachio cake. Let me go grab my mixer. I went ahead and I grabbed my vanilla salt too, and my gold coins we're going to decorate the cake with so we can make this cake. So my theme with this dinner is obviously it's St. Patrick's Day. Everything is going to be green, kind of. I guess the potatoes aren't going to be green, and I was thinking about that right when I was starting that. And I might send Josh to the store, and I might make a chimichurri sauce to go along with our potato gratin that we're going to make. We're also going to have roasted cabbage. All the vegetables are going to be roasty and toasty. So traditionally, you would put carrots, potatoes, and cabbage in that about an hour before it's done, have it boil away with that, and that would be the side dish. I prefer roasted vegetables over boiled vegetables. So I'm going to do a lot of the same vegetables that are traditional with this dinner. I'm just going to cook them a little different. The potatoes are going to be a potato galette in a way I've never made before. They're supposed to be nice and crispy. And then cabbage is obviously going to be roasted. And we're going to do sugar snap peas on the stove, buttery and garlicky. We're going to do 2 different types of soda bread. One that's going to be plain, so if people want to put jam and butter on it, they can. And one that is going to be infused with lots of green, delicious herbs and cheddar cheese. Before I make this cake, what I probably should do is preheat the oven, because this cake is going to be made with all-purpose flour, so we don't need it to rest. I've been making a lot of cakes recently with fresh milled flour, and you actually have to have the batter rest for 15 minutes before you can bake it, but I don't have to do that with this recipe. So I can get that oven preheated. And before I get started on the cake, here are some of the goodies I picked up to decorate the table. So tonight, who's coming over for dinner is my mother-in-law, her husband, my husband's brother, his wife, and 2 kids. So there is going to be 6 adults. So I'm going to set the table with some of these goodies that I picked up with you all yesterday when we went shopping. And then my mother-in-law is going to be bringing her kid table that's all the kids really enjoy sitting at when we have family dinner at her house. So we're going to have the kids at that table, and then we'll set an adult table, which will be really fun because they will have more fun sitting at that table. Just from past experience, I know how much they enjoy it. So what I'm gonna do first is actually process the pistachios. Now this recipe has volume measurements and weight measurements, and she encourages you that if you can do it, you have best results if you weigh everything out. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. But if you wanna follow this recipe and you don't have a scale, you can do it with cups if that's the way you prefer to do it. And I'm going to process the pistachios we need not only for the cake, but for the frosting as well. Might be all these pistachios. I'm gonna go ahead and just put all of them in here because we're only about 20 grams away from what I needed. So the reason I went with pistachio for St. Patrick's Day dinner is because they are green. I'm gonna go a little bit finer than that. So now I'm going to start creaming my butter and my oil and my sugar together because this needs to cream and beat together in the mixer. It says for about 2 to 4 minutes until light and fluffy. So I will get this going, and then while this is going, I can measure out my dry ingredients. But first I need to weigh out my sugar. I'm using vanilla sugar for this. Now that the butter, oil, and sugar are creaming together, that's going to take a good 3 minutes or so, 4 minutes or so. So while that's going, I can take the time to measure out the dry ingredients or weigh them out. I forgot though to tare my bowl. So I need to take the cornstarch that I added in there, try to remove as much as I can, and start over. Now this recipe calls for a mixture of cornstarch and all-purpose white flour, which some recipes call for pastry flour or cake flour. And what that is basically a flour with less gluten in it, and how you can get to that without having to go buy special cake flour or pastry flour is you can take all-purpose flour and add cornstarch. To that, we're going to add salt, baking powder, and baking soda, and I'm going to mix that together. That is our dry ingredients. I never sift my flour, I only ever whisk it in a whisk. Now this recipe was pretty particular about the buttermilk. It has buttermilk, and you can make a buttermilk substitute by taking whole milk and adding either vinegar or lemon juice to it. And she encouraged you to really use traditional cultured full fat buttermilk because it's a thicker consistency. And she said you tend to have better results with this cake if you use the full fat cultured buttermilk instead of the substitute. So I went ahead and I bought the actual buttermilk, and I need that for a couple other recipes this week. So actually for this recipe, for these cooking recipes, I needed it for the soda bread. So I just bought what the recipe called for. Now I had a beautiful light and fluffy sugar and fat and butter mixture. I'm going to add 1 egg at a time, and then I'm going to add my flavors. This recipe called for vanilla and almond extract. So the last couple cakes I've made have called for almond extract along with vanilla and vinegar. I don't know if you saw, but I actually added a teaspoon of vinegar to my buttermilk. And I've had really good luck with my cakes turning out nice, light and fluffy and delicious. So I think there might be something to adding the white distilled vinegar and the almond extract to get a good, nice rise to the cake, and then to just get a good flavor with the almond extract. At this point, I'm going to alternate my dry ingredients with my buttermilk. I did this a little backwards. Technically, I was supposed to end with the flour, not the buttermilk. But let me just tell you right now, this cake turns out delicious. I sent home a quarter of the cake. Everyone had a piece of cake after dinner on this night, but everyone also went home with a quarter of the cake. And I got text the next day saying they had the cake for lunch or an afternoon snack, and everyone really, really enjoyed it. That is mixed now at this point. I can get some of these things put away now that I've made a nice big mess in my kitchen. Comes with the territory. I am making all of the food today, basically the day of the party, so I'm gonna try to clean as I go. My dishwasher is dirty, so I can get these dishes in the dishwasher and hopefully get it run and unloaded before my guests come over so that all of the dinner dishes after dinner can go right into the dishwasher. So I haven't mixed this up completely here. I'm gonna get this on my scale. I'm gonna zero it out, and I'm gonna go ahead and weigh out the crushed pistachios. The nice thing about a scale is I can just weigh it into here. 0. I need 175 grams of pistachios. And then I'll just put the rest of the pistachios either in the frosting or to decorate the cake. And this is how we're gonna get our green color. The recipe said at this point you can put a few drops of food coloring in there if you want. I think I'm just gonna let the natural green from the pistachios color this, and it'll just be a really light hint of green. I think I'm gonna grab a bigger spatula to fold this in. And I'm gonna be gentle not to knock out all the air that we just spent putting into this cake. I'm gonna try to gently fold in these pistachios. These pistachios are unsalted and unroasted because they're gonna roast in the oven. And I don't wanna use salted because then the cake would be way too salty. Just kind of cleaning up a little spot for myself here so we can get this cake batter into our cake tins. Last St. Patrick's Day, we did a Guinness cake that was delicious. And this year, I thought we would do something a little different. So I have my 2 cake pans here. These are 8-inch cake rounds because we're gonna do a layered cake. I should measure these because these seem pretty small, and that's a lot of cake batter, but it did say 2 8-inch cake rounds. You know what I need to get for my kitchen? I just need to get a Dollar Tree ruler, because every time I need to measure something in here, I usually pull out this silicone mat. Let's see. Inches are on this side. These pistachios were not cheap, and that is why I want to make sure I'm putting it in the right size cake tin, and I am. We're good to go. I want to make sure this cake turns out because I'm having people over for dinner tonight, and I would like to be able to serve them dessert. I guess if it doesn't turn out, I could send Josh to the store for cookies because I think I'm already sending him to the store for some more herbs for an herb sauce to go on top of our potatoes. I was just about to clean up this mess, and then I thought, let's go ahead and read the cake recipe to make sure I didn't forget any ingredients in the cake, and I didn't, and to see how long it should bake for. The cake needs to bake for 40 to 45 minutes. But that got me thinking, let's read the directions for the frosting before I clean up all of this cake mess, because there's a lot of dishes, you can't even see them all. Here's some here too. I was reading the frosting recipe, and it says it needs to whip for 10 minutes. So I'm just gonna go wash this out by hand real quick, and then we're gonna get our frosting going, and then I will clean up this mess while the frosting is whipped. Then the frosting will be done. I can clean this off and put this away. And this is like no frosting I've ever made before. The steps are really unique. So we'll see how it goes. This needs to be room temperature. I just pulled this out of the fridge. This is heavy cream. I'm gonna pop this in the microwave for about 20 seconds. I very much have a type B personality. And when it comes to cooking, I wish I was a little bit more type A. I wish I could not have it look like this basically anytime I cook, but it's really hard for me not to have the kitchen end up looking like a disaster halfway through me cooking. But I always get it cleaned up in the end. So I'm gonna re-look at this, make sure I'm, a cup and a half of room temperature frosting, or room temperature butter, not a half a cup. So I gotta go pull 2 more sticks of butter out of the freezer. I just popped those in the microwave, so I'm gonna pick up some of this while that gets softened, because those just came out of the freezer. I'm gonna go ahead and weigh out my powdered sugar. And I'm not gonna sift this because I'm gonna beat this for 10 minutes. I think it will work itself out in the mixer. At least that's what I'm thinking. We need 375 grams of powdered sugar. I'm gonna add vanilla. I'm gonna add to the powdered sugar and butter mixture, now that it's whipped just a little bit, my room temperature cream, and then I'm gonna let that just go. This is gonna beat for 10 minutes. I've never made a frosting like this before, and it seems super intriguing to me. Right now at this point, it seems kind of dense and heavy, and after adding the cream, it started to look like it was curdling a little bit, but I'm trusting the process. I'm gonna let this whip, and because that's gonna take 10 minutes, that's gonna give me plenty of time to reset the kitchen. So even though I do make messes while I cook, I try not to sweat it too much, because usually when we're cooking, there's always like breaks or times where something either is on the stove cooking, or something's in the oven, or something's mixing for 10 minutes. That gives you a good amount of time to kind of tidy up the kitchen and clean as I go. What has helped me be a better cleaner as I goer, I can't think of the proper term of how I would say that, but starting a cooking day with an empty dishwasher, that is a huge game changer. When my dishwasher is either clean and not unloaded, and I'm not able to just put dishes into it as I go, or it's running in the middle of a big cooking day like this, it's much harder to keep things neat and tidy for myself, because I just end up throwing things in the dishwasher, and then when you're done cooking, I have this mountain of dishes, which does happen sometimes, but that feels overwhelming to clean up at the end. So one thing it does help me is to try, when possible, to start a cooking day like this with an empty dishwasher. And then even though I make messes throughout the process, trying to force myself to kind of tidy up and clean as I go. Things like the mixer. So when I'm done with the mixer, wiping it down before I put it away. I used to, when I first started cooking a lot, just make a huge mess, and it would be very overwhelming to have to then, after cooking, think about cleaning. And so that's something that I've really worked on, creating a habit of cleaning as I go. This is where this recipe is kind of odd, and we're supposed to actually put cold, firm cream cheese in here and whip that together after it's already been whipped. So this is almost done. There are probably about 20 more grams of pistachios in here than I need, but I'm trying to think, do I want to put these in here, or do I want to use these to decorate the top with it? or the sides. What I was thinking would be pretty would be to kind of decorate halfway up the sides with this, because it's definitely green. Or should I just put this in here? I'm gonna put it in here, but I do need to weigh it out. I need 70 grams. I'll probably be looking at what I'm doing. Oh yeah, that's way more than 70 grams. Let's see what that looks like. That's really pretty. Just gonna put those in there. All right, that's it. I don't want to overmix this, it says. Oh, here's my. This is gonna have a nice crunch to it. This cake is gonna be delicious. Now, I'm not gonna put this in the refrigerator because I'm gonna be frosting my cake in probably, I don't know. They still have probably 20 minutes left in the oven, so I'll probably be frosting them in about 2 hours or so, because they obviously need to cool down completely before I can frost them, otherwise this would melt right off. But I don't wanna put this in the refrigerator because there's butter and cream cheese in this, and we worked really hard to get this light and fluffy. I fear that if I put it in the fridge, it would set up too much, and I would not be able to frost my cake, because right now it's nice and room temperature. So what I'm thinking I'm gonna do, because I don't want a dry crust on the top of this, I've never done this before where I make the frosting earlier. Normally I wait and make the frosting until after my cakes have cooled, but I wanna get all of these frosting dishes put in the dishwasher so I can actually turn the dishwasher on. So I'm gonna make this nice and flat like this. And there is our frosting. So I'm gonna set that there. Now I can get all this put away. And our corned beef is started to boil. It was actually at a rapid rolling boil. So I put it on a different burner because I don't want it boiling. I want it more of like a gentle simmer, I think. It smells so good. My mom used to make corned beef growing up pretty often, and she would do it the traditional way. She would boil it for a long time, and then she would put cabbage and potatoes and carrots. And I think it's probably been 25 years. It was probably 10 or so when my mom made, or when I had corned beef last. Okay, I'm gonna rinse these because these have frosting on them. And then I'm gonna get my dishwasher started. I think I can fit all these dishes in here. I just took these out of the oven and I think they are at a good temperature, so we're gonna let these cool and then we're gonna get going on the potatoes next. I also pulled out some strawberry freezer jam to go with one of the soda breads we're gonna make in a bit. That's frozen, so it needs to thaw. For the potatoes, I have a 1/4 cup of butter there and a 1/4 cup of olive oil. I'm gonna heat this through. This is gonna be the base, maybe a little bit more of the olive oil. This is gonna be the base for our potatoes. And once that's melted, we'll add a bunch of garlic. So while this is going, what I'm gonna do is prep my potatoes. Now, I don't know what I was thinking when I bought these potatoes. I stuck them in my pantry with where there's a window, and some of them turned a little green. So I had to buy a few more because I'm gonna have to peel off the parts that turned green. This is a... It is St. Patrick's Day. Josh is in here. I was gonna say, this is a green-themed dinner, but I don't think we wanna eat green potatoes because they can give you a tummy ache. So these ones, I don't know, we might not even use those, but these are definitely salvageable. The recipe calls to keep the skins on, but since I did that and some of them are starting to grow eyes, Where is my peeler anyway? Found my peeler. I'm just gonna go ahead and peel these. Now this is called, what is the name of this dish? It's called crispy potato galette. Last year for St. Patty's Day, we made a potato pie and it was amazing. It was a pie crust with potatoes and cream and dill, and it was so yummy. And so I didn't want to do the exact same thing, but I wanted something more than just boiled potatoes. So I was looking at recipes and this one sounded really intriguing and delicious. And it called for both russet potatoes and Yukon Gold potatoes. I'm gonna peel these and then I'll wash them and then we will slice them with the mandolin. Is my butter over there? Looks like it's ready. Josh, would you be willing to put that garlic in there? Okay, thanks. I have a sous chef today. This is nice.
Just the whole thing?
Yep, all of it.
Stir it or anything?
Sure. The garlic's still a little frozen, so it might not.
Wooden spoon?
Yep, doesn't matter which one. Sounds good.
Smells good.
I like that you put a green shirt on today.
It was intentional.
Was it?
No.
It wasn't? It wasn't intentional? Oh, that's funny. Josh only owns the one green shirt.
I've only got like 3 shirts.
You have more than 3 shirts.
Is that way to break it up?
Yeah. And then when it's cooked in about a minute, once they thaw, you can turn that off. So it is 3:18 right now. This potato dish says it's gonna take about 50 minutes to cook. So I'm gonna prep this, but we're not gonna actually put this in the oven till probably at like 6.
Assistance required.
Done.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I would go ahead and just push this off the heat. Looks great.
It's starting to brown, so it's just...
Would you be willing to go ahead and pour that in here actually, because I don't want it to brown anymore? And it'll continue to, because that's an enamel cast iron. That'll continue to cook. Thank you. I could get used to this. That smells good.
I don't know if this is going to work.
Oh yeah, that looks perfect. Good job, Josh.
Thanks.
You called me over at the perfect time.
I wanted to let you finish, but I was like...
No, you can interrupt me,
I
that's
didn't
fine.
want it to burn.
Was I talking?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I said, assistance required.
Can you smell the corned beef?
I did.
You did when you came in?
Garlic.
Yeah. Do you like corned beef? I don't even. You've never had corned beef?
Never tried it.
Oh, really? Your mom never made corned beef growing up?
No. I think so. It's like a sandwich meat, isn't it? Or like, or am I thinking of something else?
Well, yeah, people will usually eat it for sandwiches or corned beef and like corned beef hash. That's really common. My mom would make it, I don't know, maybe 5 times a year or so, maybe less.
Yeah, look from outside.
Okay. Well, thanks for your help.
Come back in.
Now I'm kind of thinking this might not be enough potatoes. Okay, now that I officially have tons of potato peelings on the ground, I'm gonna get this off the island. I'm gonna get these washed up. So this recipe is all about the technique to get a layered, crunchy potato. So I'm hoping this turns out really well because I like the idea of this potato. So I have my mandolin here and I want this to be pretty thinly sliced potatoes. I'm gonna grab out my guard so I don't cut my finger off. I'm gonna slice my potatoes pretty thin. This is actually the second thickest layer here. So here are potatoes. What I need to do next to prep, and this is the last thing I need to do, is peel some shallots and grate these too. But my cutting board is all wet, so I'm gonna go ahead and dry that off a little bit. The recipe calls for a half a cup of shallots. I only have these 4, so I'm going to slice these, and then I'm going to add some caramelized onions that I have in my freezer to this, because I think that would be good. I think it would be nice to add just a touch of sweetness to this recipe. Oh, maybe that is a half a cup of shallots once I get them all sliced up. There we go. Looks great. I don't want these to start to oxidize, so I'm gonna take my butter garlic mixture and pour some of this on here. Quite a bit of the garlic. See, the garlic has a nice color to it, but it's definitely not overcooked. Oh, I'm supposed to put all of that in there. I'm not gonna add any salt yet, because I don't want salt to start drawing out the moisture of these potatoes, because we're not quite ready to bake them. But the oil and butter is gonna help prevent these from oxidizing while they sit here and wait for me to be ready to do the next step on them. Oh, it smells good. This is gonna take me a second to really coat all of these potatoes. These are super thinly cut, see? So basically we took them apart, we're going to put them back together, and it's gonna hopefully give us a really yummy textured potato dish. Potatoes, shallots, set that over here for now. I can get this over here for now. I need to clean my cutting board. We're gonna make our potato dish in this. I'm going to assemble it and bake it in that baking dish. This recipe called for a 10-inch cast iron skillet. I don't have a 10-inch cast iron skillet, so I'm just using what I have. And the recipe called for 3 pounds of unpeeled potatoes. I probably ended up using about 4 pounds of peeled potatoes, so we'll see how they'll fit in there. They should be fine, which makes me think maybe they're gonna take a little longer to cook, or they'll take less time to cook because that's a wider skillet, so they won't be as thick. I'm gonna plan for an hour and 15 minutes, because if they cool a little bit and aren't crazy piping hot, they'll still be delicious. And if they're served a little room temperature, or I can keep them in the oven and keep them warm and pull them out right before we eat. But my plan is to actually turn it out so that the bottom that gets really crunchy is going to be on the top. So we'll see if that works. Okay, I think my cakes are ready. I need to wash that because I'm gonna need to use that again in just a second. But I wanna get my cakes turned out so they can cool even quicker. They're right here. They're still very hot on the bottom side. Beautiful. The last 2 cakes I have made have had almond extract in them, and it just smells so good. Look how beautiful that is. I love it. Feels nice. I was just reading this soda bread recipe, and it takes an hour to cook, and I want to make 2 of them, and it's almost 4 o'clock now. So let's go harvest some herbs. I might not need to send Josh to the store to make an herb kind of sauce to go over the potatoes. I'm just gonna harvest everything I can. These parsley plants just started coming back. Let's see, do I have parsley over here? Oh yeah, I have a good amount of parsley over here. These plants should be fine with me harvesting them pretty heavily. And I have chives over here. It's going to take me a second to wash, but that'll be fine. The herbs are washed up, so I'm going to get this oven preheated. I think it was 425. 4, 2, 5. Start. I was not stressed on time at all, and then for some reason all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's almost 4 o'clock. And so I still need to set the table, which isn't going to take me very long to set the table. Decorating the table is going to take me a minute because I don't know exactly what I'm going to do to decorate the table yet. And the only other veggie we have to prep is the cabbage, which isn't going to take very long, and then the sugar snap peas we're going to do on the stove, and those aren't going to take me very long either. So I'm going to make 2 loaves. I bought some English muffins. 1, 2, 3. Yesterday at the store, but that's the only bread I have right now in my house. So we can just use this as some bread prep. That was 3. This is 4. This is bread flour. I don't feel like going and getting my other bucket. Was that 4? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to make up the 2 breads all in one, and then I'll separate them, and then I will make one an herb cheddar bread and one just a plain soda bread. And it was 375. The oven needs to be preheated too. So I'm going to change that temperature. That's sugar. Baking powder. Salt. What I probably should have done is just got 2 bowls out and made them side by side. Well, no, I'm going to cut the butter in first. I have all these random pieces of butter in my fridge. I am going to just use all of these to kind of clean out my fridge of open containers of butter. I am just making a thorough mess of everything today, but I think this has worked in pretty well. I pulled out my pastry knife. That helped. Now what I need to do is eyeball half into here. I should have just measured these out separate and done 2 batches, but that's okay. That looks like about half. So one of them I'm going to leave just like this. The other one, I'm going to add cheese to it because we're going to make it cheddar herb. So I need to chop my herbs up. That's going to make it nice and green a little bit. Each one of these is getting 1 egg. I'm gonna start with less buttermilk in each one. See how it goes and add more. I'm gonna do 1.5 cups. Because I don't know if I evenly distributed these, so I will add more buttermilk as needed. Mix that egg up a little bit. We're basically making just one big biscuit. Yep, this one's definitely bigger, but that's okay. I need a little more milk here. I'm not kneading it, I'm just pushing it together. I'll just know that this big one's gonna take much longer to cook. I'm putting these on 2 separate pieces of parchment paper because they're gonna take different times to cook. Oh, there's a piece of parsley in that one. Don't want that. And that way I can easily take them out of the oven separately. Yeah, I did not measure out those doughs evenly, but that's okay. The only other prep we need to do is the cabbage. Everything else is basically done. I just need to throw it in the oven or assemble it. Let's take a look at this. I need to still set the table, decorate the cake, get this dishwasher unloaded, get these dishes in the dishwasher. I got this island cleaned yet again. Traditional St. Patrick's Day dinner would be boiled cabbage, which is not my favorite. So I was looking at different recipes and I found a roasted cabbage. And I saw that roasted cabbage recipe and I thought it sounded delicious. Basically, we're just gonna cook this really high in the oven with some good seasoning. And I think this will have a little bit more flavor profile that I will enjoy and that Josh will enjoy better than boiled. So I have a large cookie sheet here, sheet pan baking dish. The recipe that I found, the cabbage was cut relatively thinly. So I have to decide how I want to cut this cabbage. Maybe I'll cut it like that, lay them flat. If they come apart a little bit, that'll be fine. But this is just gonna be a really, really, really easy veggie side dish. Lots of surface area for lots of browning. I think after I get this done, I'm gonna switch gears and I'm gonna set the table. This just felt good to get this done. So now every part of our dinner components have been started at this point or prepped, except for our sugar peas, but those are only gonna take me a minute to do. I don't need, oh, I already washed them and trimmed them, so I guess they have been prepped. I did that yesterday. So here's our cabbage dish. I'm not gonna put oil on this or season it until later. I'm just gonna set this over here. That'll be just fine there. And I think what I'm gonna do is go set the table because that feels like the biggest thing that's still yet to be done other than decorate the cake. And I really have been looking forward to setting the table, so let's do that next. I do not have a plan when it comes to this table, really, other than I bought some of these things and I know I want to use them, but I don't know how exactly I'm going to set it yet. I don't think I'm going to put a table runner down the middle, and I know that the adults are going to sit here and we're going to have a kid table right there, and they prefer that table. The cousins will be able to sit together and they will like that. So let's see, do I want to put a table runner down the middle? I always do. And I can't decide what I want to do. So that was me totally getting lost in my own thoughts and never finished that sentence. So I want this table to be themed St. Patrick's, but I also didn't want it to scream St. Patrick's. So I didn't want any super obvious St. Patrick's things on the table, but the colors are going to make it feel like St. Patrick. So the colors are going to be gold, green, and white. And I didn't want it to feel quite as formal as the last few tables I have sat. So that's why I was going back and forth in my head whether I was going to put a table runner down, and then I decided against it because that felt a little bit more formal than I was wanting for this table. Now, cooking, I have no problem talking all the way through it because it doesn't take very much mental energy for me. I'm very comfortable doing that, but setting a table and making the flower arrangements take all of my mental energy. And I was definitely on a time crunch at this point. I did not realize that time just kind of slipped away from me, and I did not realize how long it was going to take me to settle on what I wanted the table to look like and how to make these flower arrangements. So I am using those little white votive holders there that you see. I end up using those to make flower arrangements because I want to build on my skills of making flower arrangements, and I want to start using different types of vessels as vases. And you're going to see it probably took me 35 minutes to make the flower arrangements because I did a new technique and it doesn't feel like second nature to me. So just like whenever I try to learn a new skill in the kitchen, the first couple times it does take a little bit more mental energy, but the more times I do it, the more comfortable I am with it. And that's what I want to get to when it comes to setting a beautiful table and decorating and making a beautiful flower arrangement. But then I looked at the clock. I messed around with the table longer than I intended. We're not even done setting the table. I got it about halfway done and I realized I have got to get these potatoes in the oven. To finish these potatoes we started earlier, all I'm going to do is put a couple tablespoons of olive oil in the bottom of this enamel cast iron, not Dutch oven, this is a brazier pan. Josh got me this brazier pan, I think 11 years ago now. We were dating at the time when he got me this as a Christmas gift, and I absolutely love it. I use this thing as a baking dish, and I use it to cook things on the stove. So it's super versatile. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my potatoes that we already have butter, olive oil, and garlic on, and I'm going to layer them very, very thinly in this enamel Dutch oven. And I am taking the time not to just dump them out. I am wanting to layer them nicely because I want them to create this crazy, yummy, delicious texture when these are baked. So this is a very simple recipe in that it's pretty simple and humble ingredients, but the technique with this recipe is really what makes this dish outstanding. So remember, we have not put any salt or pepper on these potatoes yet because I didn't want the salt to draw out the moisture while these potatoes were sitting on my counter and waiting for me to assemble them. So before I added a third of the shallots, I'm going to season with salt and pepper, and then I'm going to continue layering potato, shallot, salt and pepper, potato, shallot, salt and pepper, potato, shallot, salt and pepper until it is fully assembled. And then I'm going to pop this onto the stove really high, and I'm going to get that cast iron pan hot. At this point, this enamel cast iron is room temperature, the potatoes are room temperature, and I want the cast iron to be piping hot before it goes into the oven. And that is what is going to give us an incredible crunchy crust These potatoes were the best thing that I made on this day. I've never made potatoes in this technique or this way before, and I think it's probably one of our new favorite ways. Everyone kept asking me, what's in the potatoes? What's in the potatoes? Because they had this creamy, rich flavor and texture that made you think that there was either cheese or cream in this dish, but there's no cream or cheese. The only, I guess, dairy item would be butter. But the creaminess that we're going to get from the technique of slicing the potatoes really thin and then cooking them in the oven is what I think lent to that. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert when it comes to the science of cooking, but I can just tell you they were phenomenal. I don't know if it would be as easy to get this texture if you didn't have either an enameled dish, enamel cast iron dish, or a cast iron dish, because I think it needs something that can hold on to heat really well to get that crunch. But I don't know. You might be able to use a stainless steel. You might, yeah, if you have like a heavy bottom stainless steel pan, you might be able to get away with making this as well. I would try it if you don't have either a cast iron or a enamel cast iron. Just make sure it's a heavy bottomed pot. So this is going into the oven. And if you've never used shallots before, I didn't grow up in a house that used shallots. My mom just never bought them. She would always substitute red onion. So I did that for years until I made what was it that I made? I made a homemade curry paste, and shallots is used a ton in curry pastes. And then I also fried shallots and put that on top of the curry I made. And it was the first time that I really tasted shallot and was like, oh, that's the flavor of a shallot. And they're so good. They do taste different than a red onion. So if you've never tried one, I would encourage you to try them because they're a little bit sweet. So maybe between the technique and the shallots, that's what just made that potato dish outstanding. So now I felt better now that my potatoes were in the oven and I could focus on finishing this table. I didn't want to spend another 30 minutes or 40 minutes working on this table and not having the potatoes in the oven, because then if I got the table completely set and I turned my attention back to the potatoes would not be ready when it was time to eat dinner. So I'm glad that I had that realization, because I did not, type up a schedule. Normally, when I do a dinner party, I will have kind of like a schedule or a guideline written down so I don't forget anything. But on this day, I didn't have anything. I didn't even have the menu written down. It was all in my head, which is not something I typically do. But on this day, I just got in the kitchen and started cooking, and I never took the time to do any of that stuff. And so I was glad that I didn't miss the potatoes. So here, we're back to the flower arrangements. So I saw on Instagram someone who once a week makes these beautiful flower arrangements, and one of her techniques that she recommends is taking tape and using it as a guide, or making like a grid on top of multiple different size vessels that can be used as vases. Because sometimes it's really hard when you have a wide mouth container to get the flowers to stay where you want them to stay. And so by using the tape as a grid, you can actually get the flowers to stand up when normally they wouldn't stand up. Now, this is a different shaped container. I've never made a flower arrangement in this type of container. And the reason I bought these was for two reasons. One, I liked that they were white, so they would be usable in any sort of circumstance, whether it's the St. Patrick's Day dinner or some other dinner I have down the road. And two, I liked the height of them, because a lot of the actual vases when I was looking at IKEA were all really tall. And one thing that's a pet peeve of mine is when I put flowers in tall vases and you can't see the person across the table. So what I normally do in the past when I have made the flower arrangements in tall vases is I'll actually take the flower arrangements off the table before we sit down to eat dinner, which I think is kind of counterproductive. I want the flowers to sit on the table if I'm going to take the time to make these beautiful flower arrangements. So I want them to be a little bit shorter so that you can easily see the person across from you when you're talking over dinner. And so what I was having a hard time with these vessels, because they were a brand new concept to me, was how tall to cut the flower stems, because I didn't want the flower stems too tall that they were sticking up silly out of the vase, but then I didn't want them too short to where they looked kind of squatty in the vase. So this took me a long time to do. And I thought I had bought way more flowers than I needed for this dinner party, but I realized because they're actually candle holders, because these candle holders had such a wide mouth, they just absorbed the flowers like crazy. So I went from 3 vases down to 2, and that really gave me a nice full look. So the ingredients for these flower arrangements, I think those are green mums, white tulips, a white/green rose, and then eucalyptus. And I think they turned out really pretty. So I have some gold votives that I'm going to use on the table as well for the candles. I don't end up putting those green candlesticks on the table because it just didn't look right to me. So I end up putting those green beeswax candles with the gold candlesticks on the windowsill, so we'll have a bit more candle light, because I love to eat dinner to candlelight, and I need more than just 3 tea lights in order to be able to do that. So I put the candlesticks on the windowsill, and then I put my dinner plate down and then my dessert plate on top of that. And then I have never experimented stacking dishes before. This is brand new to me, so this is a new concept to me. I mean, I've seen people do this since I was a kid, like on the Food Network. I remember watching Semi-Homemade with Sandra Lee, and at the end of her cooking program, she would always have a tablescape. And one thing, I just have vivid memories of her, not a particular tablescape, but I just remember that the end of her episode, she would always set a pretty table. And there was always dishes stacked on the table. And I've never done that before, so this was the first time I thought I would do that to add a little bit more texture and pop a color to the table. I am now going to put the silverware down. These are some gold silverware that I really only pull out when I have guests over for dinner, and that just is perfect for St. Patrick's Day. I think this table, it leans towards St. Patrick's Day, but also kind of spring. It's just like a really simple, kind of rustic, spring feeling table that I thought was nice. I bought a bunch of like gold coins, and I was like, maybe I'll put gold coins on the table, but I ended up using those on the cake instead. I put some glasses down, and then this is the table. So pretty simple, but definitely different than something I have done in the past. The next thing I want to do is force myself to do a tablescape that's super colorful, because I am someone who generally leans toward either neutrals or like monochromatic. And I am not super comfortable with working with lots of colors, but I think they're really, really beautiful. And so I think for spring, I don't know if I'll get to it before Easter, but definitely spring, I want to have a dinner where I kind of push myself to set a really bright, not bright, maybe more subtle, I'm not sure, but where I set a table that's out of my comfort zone with lots of colors, whether those are like a light color palette or a more vibrant color palette. So here we have our pistachio cake. It is completely cooled at this point. I'm going to get this cake decorated and into the fridge so that I can check this off my list. I think my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law and her husband were set to come over at this point in like 30 minutes, and I was like, I've got to get this cake decorated. So I take my cake plate, I put a little bit of frosting on the bottom so the cake doesn't slide off. I take my pistachio frosting and I start putting frosting on the cake. I couldn't decide, well, I end up deciding, you're going to see, if I was going to do like a naked style cake, but I had plenty of frosting that I end up going ahead and decorating or covering the whole cake with frosting. And this was a really yummy frosting. I'm not a huge frosting fan, but this was a really light frosting. It was super interesting that it had the cream in it, and you whipped it for 10 minutes and you added the cream cheese in after you had already whipped it for 10 minutes. And then the crunch of the pistachio was just super interesting and different. If you don't want the pistachios in your frosting, you could still make that recipe that I'm going to link for you down below, and you could put the pistachios on the outside of the cake. I almost did that, and I think that that would have been really, really beautiful as well.
But I also thought that the subtle green of having the pistachios in the cake was also really nice. I end up taking my small cookie scoop and I put 6 scoops of frosting on the top, and I take a gold coin and I put a gold coin in the middle of each one of those scoops, and that is our cake. This is the first time I've ever decorated a cake where I came up with the concept all by myself. Now, I didn't come up with a recipe, but it was my idea to put the scoops on there with the gold coins, and that felt like a big win to me. I'm not much of a cake decorator. Normally, when I decorate cakes, I just copy whatever the person does on the recipe, and I don't come up with my own idea. And today, I came up with my own idea. Even though it was very simple, I was still pretty proud of that. I do check the internal temperature of my soda breads. I wanted them at least 200 degrees. These soda breads probably could have been cooked to about 210, but they were still delicious, even though I think I probably could have pushed it and cooked them a touch longer. At this point, I'm lighting the candles. Everything is basically ready to go. I am not stressed anymore. The table is set. The food is prepped. I have the corned beef. Well, I haven't told you yet about the corned beef. I do end up getting a little bit worried about the corned beef. So you're going to see what I end up doing so that the corned beef comes out so that it's not tough. Because last St. Patrick's Day, my brisket was very, very tough. And no one wants a tough brisket.
That last hour and a half has been a mad dash to get all of this done. The table is finally set. The 2 breads are done. They're still cooling. Once fully cooled, I will cut into them. The potatoes got put into the oven, and I put a piece of foil on them because they were getting pretty dark, and I want them to be really soft on the inside. So that's covered. We have our cabbage, which I'm not quite ready to put into the oven yet. It is 5:55 right now. Nothing's in the oven, but I have this preheating so that we can roast the cabbage once I'm ready. And then this, my friend. Our corned beef has been boiling it'll be 6 hours. I put it in at 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, 6:30. Oh, it'll only be 5 hours at 6:30. I'm worried this isn't gonna be tender enough. Last year, if you were here with me, we had very tough brisket. And this year I was hoping not to have tough brisket. So this has been boiling, or simmering, I should say. I just turned it up and you can see it's not quite fall apart tender yet. This end is a little bit more tender. Oh, it's much more tender actually. I don't know. It's kind of fatty too. I wonder if this is gonna be the last time I ever make something like this. We will see. Let me take its temperature. The broth smells really good. I don't know if you can take meat's internal temperature when it's boiling. Will it read the temperature? Here, I'll pull it out. I think for it to be fall apart tender, you want like 230. I mean, it's fully cooked, but I want it tender. I don't want it tough. So we're just gonna keep it in there. I'm gonna turn the heat up, and we're gonna let this cook away until dinner is ready to be served, and I cut into this. My mom always served corned beef shredded. She didn't cut it thinly, so that's kind of what I was hoping, and we always ate it with ketchup. I know that's probably not traditional, but that's how we ate it. I have ketchup in my fridge, so if people want that, I'll pull that out. I'm really nervous. I tasted the broth, and the broth tastes really good, so I think the flavor is gonna be good. Is the texture gonna be good? You and I will find out in just a bit. I need to go change my apron. It is a mess, but I am happy with how everything turned out. We have a pop of green here. We have green cabbage. I also need to get out a pot because I'm going to blister. I don't guess it's not in here. I never know where I'm gonna find my pots, but I need to blister those snow peas. And I probably should grab a serving dish. Normally, I've been taking the time to put things in serving dishes, but tonight, I might just serve things out of the pot. We'll have to see. I'm gonna go change though. I'm not gonna turn this on. until closer to when we're gonna serve them. These are some snow peas yesterday that I washed and cut the tips off. So those are ready to go. I'm gonna set those here. All I'm gonna do is blister those with butter, salt, pepper, and maybe some garlic. And last but certainly not least, the cake is done, ready to be served for dessert. My mother-in-law is bringing a cocktail, so I'm not sure if these are gonna be the cocktail glasses we're gonna have with it, or if they're gonna be the water glasses, and these are gonna be the water glasses. We'll just have to see how it goes. And it looks like my mother-in-law just pulled up, so I need to go change real quick.
At this point, it is now time to finish up this dinner and pull it all together. I ended up putting some sweats on because it is just family over and it's a super casual dinner on this night, and we just went super casual. So I put sweats on, got comfy, and I ended up pulling this dinner together. So Josh is in the kitchen. He helps me a little bit finish up a couple things. My mother-in-law is over at this point. She brought the ingredients to make an Irish mule. So she used some Irish whiskey and made a Moscow mule instead of using vodka, and it was so delicious. And look at these potatoes, super crunchy and crispy on the bottom. They turned out so good. So I'm going to put a piece of foil on them, put them back in the oven just to stay warm while I finish pulling the rest of this dinner together. So my cabbage, I've done nothing to yet except prep it into the size I want to roast it in, but I've not seasoned it. So I sprinkle salt, pepper, olive oil, and some garlic powder on the top. And then I drizzle with a little bit more olive oil, and then I put these in a 425-degree oven for about 20 minutes until they're charred. They become so flavorful. I will absolutely make cabbage like this again. I've never made cabbage like this before, and it is definitely our new favorite way to make cabbage. I'm going to cut into the soda bread, and both of these turned out delicious. The preference was definitely the plain. The cheddar and herb one was really yummy, but everyone preferred, I think, the plain, only because the plain one was basically all eaten up and only about half of the cheddar one was eaten. But this is a lot of bread for the amount of people we had. So here I'm going to now start the sugar snap peas. I'm going to get this skillet piping hot. I mean screaming hot. Put a bit of oil on the bottom and put in my sugar snap peas. These are only going to take probably 5 minutes to cook, and then I will season them with salt and pepper once they are browned. I don't like to put the salt and pepper on these until they have some really dark, crispy color. And then I'm going to get these while they're still bright green. Some of them are more cooked than others. I don't care if every piece has a bit of char. I just want some of them to have a char, but mostly I want them to stay bright green. And the salt and pepper and oil make them taste good. So here you can see we've got some nice caramelization on this cabbage. The caramelization was actually more on the bottom side. So as I'm putting this cabbage into the serving dish, I end up kind of flipping it upside down just so you can see the beautiful char color we got on this cabbage. It's not mushy. It still has a good crunch to it, just like the peas do. I'm going to put those into the oven to stay warm while we cut into this brisket. So the brisket turned out fantastic. I was so worried. You can see this piece even fell off here. I think it was really helpful that I ended up cranking the heat on the brisket so that it could finish getting tender. I do cut off this piece of fat because I don't think any of my family members really do want to eat that. So I cut that off and I kind of set that aside just so it's not in the pieces of meat that I have cut up for people to serve. And I could cut this against the bias, which I think is more traditional, but when my mom made corned beef, this is how she would cut it, and this is how I like corned beef. So she would cut it in half, and then she would cut it into these chunks, and you can see here just how tender it is. It's kind of like falling apart, but it's not too tender. And then when you kind of eat it, you kind of have bigger pieces, not like super thin. So this is not traditional how to cut corned beef, but it's the way that I like it. One time my mom cut it the more traditional way, and I was very sad. So I have that memory. So I wanted to kind of cut it the way that I remember really enjoying it. I do end up getting ketchup out for people, and no one put ketchup on their corned beef or on their potatoes, which I had no problem if people wanted to do that, but everyone said that it tasted just as good without it, so that felt like a good compliment. Here I'm pulling everything out of the oven because we're just about to serve dinner. Before I served dinner, I did cut this potato dish into wedges, just so that it would be easier for everyone to kind of serve up themselves and they weren't having to cut into it themselves. And now at this point, everything is done. We have our 2 different types of soda bread with butter and jam, our caramelized cabbage and sugar snap peas. Both of these were so good. Our crispy potatoes with shallots, butter and garlic, and our shredded, it's not shredded, I guess, our home cured corned beef. What a delicious dinner. This was definitely better than the dinner that I made for last St. Patrick's. After dinner, there was probably about 20 or 30 minutes. The kids played, the adults talked, and then we were hungry enough again to have dessert. I ended up cutting pretty small pieces. I cut them bigger to begin with, and then I ended up cutting them in half. So everyone just kind of had like a little sliver of cake. And then I sent home everybody with a quarter of a cake. So we were left with a quarter. We ended up eating a quarter on this night, and then Josh's brother and his wife and my mother-in-law and her husband all got to take a quarter home, and they were able to enjoy that the next day, which was really nice because we wouldn't have been able to go through 3/4 of this pistachio cake all on our own. So it was nice that everyone was able to kind of have a little, basically like a party favor to take home with them. And then I used my new IKEA dishes, and I cannot believe I've gone years and years without having dessert plates. It was so nice not having to use bowls because dessert plates take up a whole lot less space in a dishwasher than soup bowls do.
Good morning. The dinner last night was incredible. It is early. My family is not even up yet. I am ready for the day. It is pouring outside, and I am heading out into the grow room to start this year's peppers and onions. Right after everybody left, I went straight to bed. The kitchen was a disaster. The island was full of all of last night's dinner, which was incredible. I was so stressed, like I told you. I was like, I don't think this corned beef is going to be tender. It was so tender and delicious. Everyone said it was the best corned beef they have ever had, which was a huge compliment. I was so honored that that was the case. And the potatoes, let me tell you, that was so simple to make. And everyone could not believe that all that was in it was garlic, olive oil, salt, pepper, potatoes, butter, and chives. Not chives. What are they called? Shallots. Everyone thought that there was like cream, and it was just so flavorful. It was so good. The cabbage was wonderful. I will make cabbage that way again. I definitely prefer that over boiled cabbage. Sugar snap peas were delicious. And what else do we have? Oh, the bread. The bread was so good. I actually preferred the plain. I think everyone preferred the plain a little bit. So Josh went ahead last night, did all the dishes. He even got a pot of coffee ready for me because he knew I was getting up early to do this. So I have a hot cup of coffee right there, second cup. I had a first cup before I showered. So he got the kitchen all clean for me, which was a huge blessing. So after everyone left, I just went to bed. He even cleaned up the island. I don't think he knows where those go, so I'll take care of those today, and I will just leave these out. I think they are pretty. I definitely have some learning to do when it comes to flower arranging in a wide mouth vase, but I'm happy with my first attempt. I think it's pretty now that these tulips are starting to open and kind of fill out that space a little bit more. I am not going to worry about unloading the dishwasher or putting these pots and pans away because I'm going to head out and start all the peppers and tomatoes for this year's garden, or at least that's going to be my goal. So I want to thank you for being here. If you want to watch some more videos, let me pop them here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. I want to say that I greatly appreciate every single one of you, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.